be sharing with you all the books that I read in March. I'm currently sick, so if I sound like shit, that's why. But anyway, let's just get into the books. The first book that I read in March is The God of Endings by Jacqueline Holland. This is a vampire book, and if you know me, you know I love a vampire book. But essentially, this book follows our main character, I forget her name. She's going by Colette right now, but I think she went by like Anya when she was a child. And it's following her in two different timelines. One, when she was growing up in like the 1800s with her father and brother, and then an illness swept her town, ended up killing her family members, and right at the last minute, while she was on her deathbed, this grandfather figure swept in and took her back to his estate and turned her into a vampire. It follows her beginning as a vampire and kind of like being sent to some Eastern European country by her grandfather, and all that entailed for her. And the other timeline is following her in the 80s when she's being known as Colette Lessange, who is a lonely artist who runs a fine art school for young children. She kind of has a rule that, like, about the kind of children that she takes, where she tries to make sure that the parents are very stable so that she kind of doesn't have to deal with the parents and can just focus on the children. But she does make one exception for this little boy named Leo, whose parents are just a fucking mess. But she sees a really unique artistic talent in Leo and decides to let him join the school regardless. And that turns into a little bit of a sticky situation for her. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I honestly really loved it. There's something holding me back from 5 stars. I don't know what it is. We don't have to talk about it. 5 stars is a feeling, okay? This is 4.5. But throughout reading this book, I realized that this is really my type of vampire book. Like, I'm not all that into, like, the Twilight kind of vampire where it's like, ooh, hot, very, very old man is into a teenage girl. Or, like, I'm just not into the vampire stories where it's just, like, all about their sex appeal. But I really like the vampire stories that are dark, where it's like, they're like, oh my god, I can't stop living, and living is like a curse at this point, and all I want to do is die. Maybe that's a little too personal, but those are the vampire books I really like. Like, I like the books where the vampires are suffering with the idea that they're gonna live forever. And in this book specifically, she feels like she's constantly being chased by this god of endings, and she feels like everything in her life that she loves just has come to an abrupt end. And because of that, in the 80s at least, that timeline, she has made no attachments to anyone. She tries really hard to live independently so that there's nothing the god of endings can steal from her. But then in comes a little boy named Leo with a very difficult family life, and things start to change. And then on top of being dark and depressing, which I loved, I was also really surprised that this was a debut. The writing was so good and the story was so captivating that it really felt like it was a much more mature writer. I'm also very surprised I haven't really heard anyone talking about this one. Like, I've seen it in a few places, but I feel like it's definitely not getting the recognition that it deserves. This is definitely an underrated gem, and I can't wait to see what the author does next. Next, I picked up Little Eyes by Samantha Schweblin. This book follows these little stuffed animals named, I don't know how to say it, Kentuckys, I'm guessing? Because otherwise it would be like Kentuckys, and that would be weird because of the state. So anyway, there's little stuffed animal things called Kentuckys that have cameras and can move around. But the thing is that they can do all this because there's a person on the other side that is watching you through the eyes of these animals and operating it. So this book follows a wide cast of characters. Some are the owners of Kentuckys, and some are the operators. And it really explores basically everything you can explore in this. Like, the opening scene, for instance, is like little girls showing their naked bodies to this Kentucky thing. And that brought me right back to the days of Omegle. Not that I ever did anything like that, but I do know, like, young girls who are, like, 12 doing shit like that on Omegle at the time. And it was just as creepy then as it is now. But I think this book does a really good job at imagining what the effect of these creatures would be. Like, some people go crazy and, like, torment their little stuffed animal. Others use their operating power as a way to blackmail the owner of the animal. And in general, it just explores like the parasocial relationships that would form. But I do think that the way this book is structured is its downfall. It's like 30 very short chapters. Some follow repeating characters, but some feature a character that never makes a reappearance. And so I feel like the story would almost be better told if you followed like a set group of characters and their experience throughout versus like trying to do this from so many different angles. Like, only following one or a couple different narratives I think would have just strengthened the concept. Overall, I think the idea behind this was really cool, but I'm left wishing the books had done a little bit more. And I gave this book 3.5 stars. So not a bad book by any means. If it sounds interesting, I would definitely recommend picking it up. I just wanted a bit more out of it, if that makes sense. Then the next 4 books I read were for a reading vlog, so unfortunately I'm not going to tell you my thoughts, but I will tell you the synopsis. So the first book of that reading vlog was Cherry by Nico Walker. This book essentially follows a young man who goes to, where does he go? Iraq. He signs up for the army and he's sent to Iraq. And it follows his time there, and then it follows his time coming back when he is addicted to heroin and starts robbing banks. And it's actually inspired by the author's life, because that same exact shit happened to him. And he gave some sort of interview on BuzzFeed or something like that, and then the publisher actually approached him and asked him to write a book about his life, and this was the result. Then I picked up The Incendiaries by R.O. Kwon. This book follows 3 main characters, Phoebe, Will, and I think his name was John, but his name isn't on the back. So essentially Phoebe and Will meet at university and they quickly form a relationship. But then Phoebe slowly starts joining a cult? Question mark? Led by this man named John who claims that he escaped North Korea. And that's kind of the gist here. Then I read The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. This book follows a brother and a sister, they're twins, and it tells their story growing up, particularly revolving around the death of their cousin who came to visit. But it tells the story of basically all their family members and what happened to them before and after this visit. It touches upon class and race and a whole bunch of stuff. And the last book I read for that vlog was Stay and Fight by Madeline Fitch. This book takes place in Appalachia and essentially follows our main character, Helen, who was living in Seattle and had recently received some money from the death of her uncle and was dating this guy. And this guy was like, you know what we should do? We should use that money to buy land in Appalachia. And somehow he convinces her to do this. And so they end up doing that, but he leaves very shortly after they get there. And she instead meets these 2 women who are in a relationship, and one is pregnant, and they're living on land for the Women's Land Trust. But when they give birth to a baby boy, they only have 5 years to stay on that land, and then they have to get out. So Helen goes to, what are their names? Karen and Lily, and suggests that they move on to her land and they can all live together. So the story about queer community and love and motherhood and living rurally. After that, I picked up There There by Tammy Orange. This book essentially follows a big powwow that's about to happen in Oakland, and it's following a large cast of characters as they're preparing for this. And right in the beginning, you find out that a certain group of characters are planning to rob the powwow because the powwow has some money there for a winner of the dance competition, I believe. This book, holy shit, it just blew me away. I rated it 5 stars. And if you know me, you know that I don't give out 5 stars very often. This year, I've just been giving them out like crazy. But I feel like in 2024, I didn't even have 5 stars. So I don't know what's happening right now, but I'm loving it. I loved this book so much. It was just brutal, but also beautiful at the same time. I really felt like I connected to all the characters. Although I will say my one maybe critique, which doesn't even feel like a critique, is that there was such a large cast of characters and so many different POVs that at times when I would start a POV, I was like, is this someone that I've already read from or not? But shortly after that, I would figure out if I had read from them or not. So it's not even really a critique. It's just kind of saying to someone that if you're reading this and you don't do well with a lot of POVs, just be mindful of it. There is a guide in the front of the book to who the characters are, so that could be helpful for someone. I just tend not to flip back to guides and stuff like that when I'm reading, so that's a me problem. But the writing was just beautiful. Orange really knows how to pack a punch. I was into this right from the beginning. I could not put it down. It's a very short book, but it's so impactful. And the ending was very hard to read, but I couldn't stop reading nonetheless. It's an amazing, amazing book. I really loved it, and I can't wait to read Wandering Stars. And then, very sadly, the last 4 books I've read in the month of March were all for another reading vlog, so keep your eyes peeled out for this one, but unfortunately I can't give you my thoughts. The vlog is going to be full of spoilers, So, sorry about that, but I think most people have read these books, and that is The Hunger Games. Notice how Sunrise on the Reaping is not here. That's because I have not finished that of this moment, but it's my next read. So, these were not in order. I just picked it up and Mockingjay was in the front. Okay, so anyway, the first book is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. If you don't know, this book essentially takes place in a dystopian future in the United States where the United States has been divided into 12 districts and the capital. This book takes place in District 12 and follows the main character Katniss Everdeen. Essentially, a rebellion occurred in this country like 75 years ago. And as a result of the rebellion being quashed, the capital established the Hunger Games, where 2 children from each district are chosen, and they go to fight to the death in an arena, and only one can survive. And this book follows Katniss, who, on the day of the reaping, which is when they choose who goes to the Hunger Games, her young sister's name is chosen, and she volunteers as tribute. And so that's what the first 3 books follow. The next is Catching Fire, and the third is Mockingjay. So these 3 are the original trilogy, which I read for the first time since I was like 11 or 12, and I loved. I will say that. I'm obsessed with this right now. And then after that, I picked up The Ballad of the Songbird and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is a prequel novel following who will become President Snow, who's like the evil bad guy in the Hunger Games series. But this book follows Snow when he's growing up. He's like 18, living in the capital, and the 10th Hunger Games are about to occur. And they decide that for the 10th Hunger Games, they're going to take a group of elite children and assign them to the tributes as mentors. This is the first time anything like this is happening in the Hunger Games, and they're trying to get like more people watching them because the Hunger Games are broadcast to the districts. And Snow is chosen to be one of these mentors, and he's chosen to be a mentor to a girl from District 12 named Lucy Gray. And that's all I'm going to say, because there's so much that happens in this book, but I don't want to spoil any of it. So there you go. Those are all the books I read in the month of March. I'm sorry that I couldn't summarize all of them. I promise that I will do better next month at reading books that aren't only in a reading vlog, or at least I'll try my best. Let me know what books you read in March down below, and I'll see you soon with another video. Goodbye!